Good morning and welcome to the Daily Light Devotion. I hope all of you have had a wonderful Wednesday and looking forward to today, that is the 4th of September. Today we're going to look at chapter 21, verses 26 to 36. The title is Standing Firm in the Midst of Opposition. So Paul followed the elders' advice and joined in the purification rites to demonstrate respect for Jewish traditions. Yet, despite this, his humility, false accusations soon stirred up riots, right, against him. A mob had gathered, dragged him out of the temple, and his life seemed to be in danger. Still, in even this chaos, God's hand was at work. And these passages teach us that obedience to God does not guarantee an easy path, but his presence sustains us when opposition rises. So, verse 26 says, Then Paul took the men the next day, having been purified with them, and entered the temple to announce the completion of the days of purification, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them. So, Paul humbled himself, right, laying aside his rights to build unity and avoid offense. So, humility often requires giving in for the sake of others, and even when it is misunderstood. So verses 27 and 29. Now when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews from Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd, crying out, This is the man who teaches all men everywhere against the people of the law and this place. And furthermore, he's also brought Greeks into the temple. So lies started spreading quickly, right? Paul was falsely accused of dishonoring the temple. Even when we act with integrity, others may misjudge or slander us. Um, and that's unfortunate, but that's the truth because they're coming against, Jesus Christ. They're not coming against Paul here. These are not individual people, but the spirit of Antichrist, right? Um, verses 30 and 32. And all the city was disturbed, and when people ran together, seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. Now, as they were seeking to kill him, news came to the commander, and that all Jerusalem was in uproar. He immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. So the mob's anger boiled over, and but God used Roman soldiers to intervene and preserve Paul's life. So God's protection may come in unexpected ways, right? Even through unlikely people. Verses 33 and 36 say, Then the commander came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with two chains. And some among the multitude cried one thing, and some other another. For the multitude of people followed after, crying out, Away with him. So Paul was bound in chains, right? Just as Agabus had prophesied in Acts 21:11. Yet the mob's cries echoed the same words once shouted at Jesus, Away with him. So follow Jesus means sharing his suffering, right? But also sharing his victory. So what are some of the life applications we can learn from here? We need to choose humility, even when it means laying down our personal rights, right? We need to expect that obedience to God may bring misunderstanding and opposition, and that's not from God, right? That's just the enemy working through people who are not walking with God, right? It's a spiritual battle, remember Paul wrote. It's not nothing to do with flesh and blood, right? We need to trust God's protection, right, which can come in surprising form. So, what we know is that the people that Paul had ministered were praying for him. So, and Paul himself may be seeking God's protection, right? And God came through, right, for him because he was being covered by the elders of Jerusalem, by the people he had spread the gospel all around, right? And even I'm sure Agabus was praying for him. So we need to remember that suffering of Christ identifies us with him. When we are struggling and suffering because of the gospel, when we are getting persecuted, we can identify with Christ like Paul did. We need to stand firm in faith knowing no opposition can stop God's purpose in our lives. So we need to understand that. And I want to encourage you from these verses. Paul's chains did not mean defeat, they confirmed God's word and positioned him for greater testimony. And likewise, when we face opposition for Christ, we can stand firm knowing God is sovereign. He is top of the food chain, right? When we seek Him, He will always come through. And He's always, that's His will to come through for us. Our trials become platforms for His glory, and this is the time when he started writing the letters, right, to the churches that he had ministered. And certain churches he had not ministered, but he had a will to come and visit, right? And he wrote these letters just for correction. And most of his letters he wrote from prison when he was bound by chain. So God can get the glory and God can use us when we are completely surrendered, like Paul, in any situation, right? So this is a very encouraging for us. And I hope you have a wonderful Thursday today. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.